Wagyu Kakasa, Wagyu Fete. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Media Watch. I'm your host, Dr. Savi. Now this week, I did say that we'd try our best to get some fantastic guests, and every time we do the show, we get fantastic guests. This time around, I'm really honoured to have someone who's taken time out of their diary, and that is Chief, I've got to get it right, Chief Superintendent Raj Kholi, as well as Sukhi Wahiwala, right? I hope I got that right, correct? Yeah?
Wahiwala,
correct,
that's
right.
okay.
Well, as you know, the shows you're usually about looking at the news, looking at the media, what's actually going on. And also we like to bring on people to talk about their personal experiences to inspire people out there. And it gives a real great insight into the kind of things that they're doing. So this time round, the two people that we've got, one person's done very well in terms of progressing through the police force in the UK. And also another person that we've got, which is Sukhi, is a person who I best describe him as a serial entrepreneur. Got to get that right. It's serial entrepreneur. Somebody who's done lots of work in terms of commercial companies and gained a lot of skills in mentoring people, and now runs those kinds of workshops, and also is responsible for Seek Entrepreneur. He's also responsible for another website which is Seek Role Models, does inspiring dinners, and has a series of coaching workshops. And as you were just saying to me just before we started the show, he also does workshops for people who probably can't afford some of the high-end training, but brings it more to the world, so it's generic training they can get and get them on a good route to go forward and actually start on their progress of making it in their respective careers. So thanks for coming on the show, really appreciate it. So unfortunately this week we will start off with a news item. The biggest news item of the week was on Monday night, where we saw something like 50 odd people, more than that possibly, because there's still, the body count is still quite high, and over 500 people being injured by this strange individual. That's the best way to describe it, someone called Stephen Paddock, whatever his name is, who kind of got loads of guns and actually went up in a hotel and fired on a country and western concert that was going on. So it was an absolute manic situation out there, and very, very sad for many people. I actually saw a news report just now where there was a girl, she was just saying, I'm going to have to live with a bullet in my back. You know, and like, it's a devastating thing, really. I mean, do you think that the world is becoming more of a dangerous place? I mean, when's it going to stop? I mean, we have security on planes. Are we going to have now security in hotels and stuff? I mean, you know, it's a rough situation, right?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it goes without saying that, you know, our thoughts, my thoughts with the family and friends of those people affected, and with the United States of America. You know, whatever the debate is about Donald Trump and the administration, there's been some people have lost their lives, and frankly speaking, we've got I'm going to call him a maniac, but that gives maniacs a bad name. I don't know what this person was thinking and doing. So the question is, has the world become a more dangerous place? I don't think it's become a more dangerous place. I think that there is, however, an increase in mental health issues, whatever that might be. Some of that might be chemical imbalances in some of the processed food that we eat, you know, some of the chemicals that are in the air. Some of it could be down to social media, you know, the intensity of social media, Twitter, Facebook, WhatsApp, all these kind of things. And so there is definitely an increase in mental health. Stephen Paddock is a 59-year-old man, so he really should be mostly, from the social media side, probably partitioned off from that. But is it a more dangerous place? I don't think it's a more dangerous place. If we talk about London, it's never been safer in terms of violent crime. So you take out London Bridge and Westminster Bridge, but even if you include them, as terrible as those incidents were, London is an exceptionally safe place. We still do have an issue about violent teenagers killing each other. But across the piece, I don't think the world's a more dangerous place. No, I don't.
Do you think it's important for people to, I mean, I always kind of think of it in terms of like, where's the humanity gone? You know, where's the thought that, you know, we always see the negativity in news. We never see the positive stuff where people go and help other people, you know?
It's a really very awkward position to understand, and we can't really talk on behalf of that individual, because I'm not even sure whether we can even call him a human being, but we don't know what's really gone on in his life. But I'm absolutely 100% in alignment with what Chief Superintendent has just shared. And the reality is, in my opinion, that it's a combination of communication. We have now, we're in the heightened position of, I don't think the globe's been so connected ever in our lifetime in the humanity as we understand it. You can drop a pin in London, and somebody, you know, in the North Pole would have probably watched it on YouTube or you know, some format today. So influences of its heightened position, in my opinion. So, you know, we've got to basically understand that, and this is an inevitable part of society right now. As much as we can influence people, news also travels that quick. So some of the things that probably did happen in the localities of a village or a town are not necessarily hidden from society anymore.
Could it be that we've got so much news media now that news is so quick to get? So whereas in the past there could have been that same level of violence in society that
was already
hidden,
there.
You know? I mean, I know that you were talking about crime statistics. There is this issue about that burglaries have gone down, but maybe there's different types of crimes that are on the increase. I mean, there's cybercrime. There's people doing some weird stuff to each other.
Yeah. So I mean, so the classic crimes of theft and violence have gone down in London, although there's been a marginal increase recently. But the question about the news, as you portrayed it, so we know that the news enters our lives very quickly. We're all walking news bulletins. We've all got mobile phones. We're told almost before the police find out, many times, major incidents. So you've got the instantaneousness of it. Then you've got the recycling and the reliving of it and the constant flicker of those images that will start to affect people. I touched upon earlier on about predominantly young men in parts of London killing each other with knives. And we think it's a new phenomenon. We've had, the football hooligans of the 80s and 90s, attacking each other. We've got the mods and rockers of the 60s and 70s attacking each other. We've had a couple of world wars where the average age of the person dying was 19 years old, like the famous song about Vietnam War.
Hardcastle.
Exactly. Human beings have had a propensity for violence toward each other since forever, since Stone Age man and woman existed. So I think there is something about this propensity to violence. So have we lost humanity? I don't think we've lost humanity. I just don't think we're actually as human as we could be.
What's really disturbing for me is that, that humans don't tend to learn from the past. So if you look at things like Auschwitz, if you look at all the, the concentration camps, and we saw that repeated in more recent years as well, or you even see the Rohingya, people that are coming out of Burma. There's something inside humans that wants to cause serious amounts of damage to other people. And there'll be minor things that they'll start fighting each other about. But it doesn't take long. We saw that recently with the right-wing party emerging in Germany as well, that in a country like Germany, which has got such a disturbed past, those kind of remnants of fascism seem to emerge again, don't they?
No, please carry on.
No, I mean, it's got, the whole Austria, Germany, positioning around right-wing politics, it's quite frightening because the Second World War wasn't that long ago, really. It's in the memories of probably certainly our parents.
Absolutely. And
if we're lucky enough, and if we have our grandparents, will definitely remember the Second World War and all that. So the rise of the right wing in France, Germany, Holland, Austria is a worrying trend. But you do get these sort of cycles of the right wing making an appearance and then left wing or socialism tends to take over. But what's different now is that this gets played out in the media or gets played out in your pocket on your mobile phone. So, the grooming of whether it's for ISIS terrorism or right-wing terrorism or Sikh terrorism, whichever way you want to look at it, they are people grooming young men and women. Whereas as parents, we're sitting downstairs watching EastEnders, our children are upstairs, we don't know who they're talking to. So, we're getting adults grooming young children for all sorts of acts, whether it's child sexual exploitation or terrorism or committing crimes on their behalf, whatever it might be. That's for me is the worry, is that this right-wing, left-wing issue, I think it's kind of existed for a long time.
Is it worrying for us to think about the fact there's this alt-left, alt-right thing that people, when recently there was all that violence in the US and no one really stood up and said those white supremacists should not have been doing what they were doing, or the misunderstanding of Black Lives Matter. What we see, there's also this underlying thing in society where you might find Hindu fundamentalism or fascism, like the RSS. That they're doing things on the kind of subversive. They're doing things covertly. You can't actually see it on the surface, and then sometimes things are institutionalized where certain people like each other in particular ways or do each other favors. So sometimes even some of that agenda is not played out in black and white. But what I would say, as more of a question for you, Sukhi, is that if you look at leadership, right, someone like Donald Trump, we're not criticizing anyone, we're just saying, is it not important to be rather than actually be positioned to say, well, this is a debate that we need to have.
Yeah.
There's too much playing it safe. You know, let's not talk about guns right now. Let's not talk about the right wing right now. Well, it's not just the right wing; it's the left wing. So, you know, hang on a second. What is right, but then in whose view? But we do know from history, the negative stuff really does come from an extreme element, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. I mean, thank you for asking such a great question. It's multifaceted, as we understand, but there are levels of, we have to boil down to the fact of media, because our current influence, as Chief Superintendent said again, is that specifically we're walking around with these little beacons that are telling us information. So there's Chomsky, who talks specifically about consented influence. He's talking about how by just opening up and reading the latest news, we're already accepting the influence. And there is no doubt that media is managed, and it's planned, because if you remember a few years back, just bringing it back to the UK, if I may, you know, all of a sudden there was around the 2010, 2011, we had a big issue around dogs, you know, being mauling animals and beautiful, you know, babies and attacking children, and some fatalities. But I'm very certain that hasn't disappeared, but all of a sudden it was a big thing at the time. So there's some kind of a plan. And then we have to ask a bigger question, that how much of media is contrived just for an element of control? Because if we have something like a being up on it, we're saying we remain distracted. So under the context of leadership, I think, in accordance with the way Guru Nanak Dev Ji has also shared it as well, in the way I understand it, is that we have to learn to look after ourselves. We have to be responsible for ourselves. And leadership is the ignition, conscious or unconsciousness, of leading ourselves first. We have to be self-responsible.
So let's talk a little bit about, we'll leave the news for a bit then, right? So specifically about leadership. So you actually mentor people, right? In those kind of core attributes that you need, like inclusiveness, or talk to people and saying that this is understanding the situation and explaining it and communicating and managing lots of different information and setting direction. Somebody once said to me the difference between somebody who's a project person and somebody who's more leadership orientated, like in a building site. A person who's in a building site who does the plumbing, make sure the plumbing gets done and the electricity's done in a house. You can give somebody a supervisor's job to do that. But the real leader is the one that looks at the building site, gets a ladder, puts it up inside the building, goes to the top of that ladder and goes, you know, when we finish this housing estate, we're going to be buying that housing estate over there and we're going to start doing the next thing, having that kind of, you know, horizon planning. So do you come across a lot of people, you've got a lot of commercial skills. What kind of challenges are coming up these days with people that you meet? What do they need? Do they need role models?
I was going to say, what I believe personally, sorry, beg your pardon. I believe personally that leadership is the key, and within there are many pillars. But some of the ones are communication. We also have delegation. We always understand accountability. These are like the three sort of key kingpins of leadership. But if I go back one stage just to the human being, because we're talking about leadership of humans, right? And then you said the person who's a difference between a person who's an accountant type person, or a supervisor. Yeah, that's true. There's sciences out there, which is one of them is a psychometric, and it's an understanding of how we truly understand internally the world. It's our version of the world that matters. So how do we see it? For example, there's a gentleman who started around 1930s. And his name is Alfred Korzybski, and he wrote a book called Science and Sanity, in which he clearly states, he says, man himself is just a meaning-making machine. That's all we do. We make meaning after meaning after meaning. So that the ease of leadership is to understand what is the meaning that the other person is making. So we have another context of Korzybski goes on to say, and he says that the map is not the territory. So the map being our brain isn't the world at large. It's actually just our version of the world. You know, like I see this table from a different angle to yourself. So the point is that when you're truly leading, if you can lead yourself, and if you can find out what other people's meanings and motivators and behavioral types are, then you just need to align with those types, engage that to get the outcome that is required.
It is interesting actually, because even when you do academic study, there's the meaning of organisation and the organisation of meaning. If you just even dissect that, is it project orientated, or are you actually understanding how that organisation actually works? So there's a lot that you can use on those kind of terms. So, Raj.
So for me, I mean, in my world, in the public sector, or possibly in the private sector, you've got leader, manager, supervisor. You can be all three of those things at once, or you could be a specialism in one of those things. For me, a legitimate leader is a visionary, not a reactionary. So we talked about Donald Trump. I think he's reactionary and therefore not a leader, because a leader will be visionary. Leaders need to be able to be reactionary, but actually their gaze is, as you said, on top of that ladder looking outside. Where are we going next? Not the here and now, the future.
They got an understanding of the current, though.
They've got to have of course you've got to have an understanding of the current. A great leader, so all the religious leaders are great because they're visionaries. They saw, they looked ahead, and then they connected with their people. So you've got some values in there, and you've got some behaviours in there. Now, of course, one of the greatest leaders in the world was Hitler. Pains me to say it, but he was. He took millions of people to follow down a path that caused the greatest catastrophe of the 20th century by a long shot. So it's not just about having great values and behaviours, it's about making sure those great values and behaviours connect with humanity. And that's the bit he lost. So for me, leadership is about humanity. So when I lead my police officers and police staff, it's about, at the end of every one of these crimes, isn't a statistic, it's a human being who's become a victim. And we need to always remember that somebody's son, daughter, father, mother, niece, nephew, etc., etc. So, you know, I claw back on things like, you know, what the Bible says, you treat everyone as if they're your own brother or sister, or you know, in our religion, you know, where, you know, you're doing seva, you're serving the people. So I regard myself as serving.
Do you think that was the driving force for you to become, you know, initially, you know, because you did a master's in, I think it was, I remember,
biomedical engineering.
That's right.
Yeah.
Knew you back in those days, and you went,
Indeed.
which graduate path shall I follow? And then little did I know that 20 years later you'd be doing this. You know,
it's interesting. I mean, there's lots of things. So for me, it's a mixture. It's about seva. So it's about
do you think it's in the Sikh's DNA to do seva?
I'm going to say yes, because it surrounds us. You know, you go to the Gurdwara, you go to anyone's house, and you're expected to serve. So I think it's in our DNA. And so you only have to look at the public service that Sikhs do in India. You know, I know what the stats are now, but certainly a few years ago, they made up 25% of the Indian army, for example. So there is that public service, and is there a greater service to your country than to lay down your life, irrespective of whether the war is legitimate? It's still, you know, the greatest service is to give up your life for your country. So as Sikhs, I think seva is in our DNA. It has to be. And then for me, it was my mum and dad. So my dad was a teacher. Now he is the great entrepreneur. Got a huge property business in Glasgow, coming from a fairly, you know, standard, straightforward background. Mum was a social worker. You know, both my boys, one's going to, you know, work in the field of social work, the other one's doing psychology and counselling. And I think it kind of, you know, I think it breeds
giving
itself.
nature, isn't it?
But the other bit about why I became a police officer, people don't believe me, but, you know, back in the day when Doctor Who's companion was a police officer.
Did you want one of the big blue box?
I sat there watching Roy Castle as Doctor Who's companion.
Yeah, I remember that.
In a police officer's uniform, jumping in and out of a police box. Fast forward 21 years, and my mum says to me, Raj, why do you want to be a police officer? And I said, Mum, you bought me a policeman's uniform when I was 5, at my most impressionable age. So, in answer to your question, is it in our DNA? I think it has to be. It just has to be.
Let's talk a little bit about success. I mean, you've done really well, you know, and wish you the best going in the future.
Okay.
Maybe one day, UK, you never know,
Yes.
or internationally as well. Do you think that compounded with the ability to want to serve, right, there's also this issue about survivalists, you know, in a way. My father, you know, came to the UK in 58. Many people came in the 50s and 60s and 70s, and that kind of has almost like been passed on as a value, you know. As a value is a bit of a strong word. We want you to do well, but you've got to survive as well. So therefore, that, you know, that gives people, you know, the motivation to want to succeed, to want to try new things, to want to be successful in their particular careers. Do you find that when you talk to some of the people that you mentor, is that something that's driving them? Is it because their parents are saying you've got to do really well, you know, because you've got to, you know, establish yourself in society, even though, even my kids, your kids, we're now, you know, we're all born here, and we've got another set generation, so they're third generation now, and they may have fourth generation. Will that disappear, or will that always be there?
I think it's a very deep question, but the reality is it transmitted? I think the urge to do well, to move forward, is definitely a nurture type of thing. But we also have an understanding that it can be embedded, because I've got so many people, you can say Lord Sugar, who didn't have the greatest of starts.
You mean that embedded means that it's kind of put in?
Nature, and one can be embedded, which is nurture.
Nurture,
absolutely. So it can be embedded.
Nurture or nature, isn't it? You know?
Nurture, yes, right, yeah. But nature is our sort of genetics and how we see things and how we understand the world. I mean, then you've got individuals such as such a Lord Sugar, who sits there, comes back from an understanding that he was just a person who said, I've had enough, I'm going to do something about this, and today he stands as one of the billionaires of this country.
But in a way, just to interrupt you for a second, if you look at Lord Sugar, Jewish background, immigrant parents, I mean, that's something that's still fueling his ability to, to do something. Maybe that's what it is.
I really agree with you, but there's also just another element as well. There's many who have come in exactly the same situation, have not created, have not achieved in that situation. So then we have the element of nurture as well, which then is after the community and how it is. And in our Sukhi, it says very clearly, Sangat Bangat Maibab. So our future is in our community. But then the point arises that you said something really beautiful, that can it be adjusted, can it be changed, that survival, or you must survive? Well, it can be. It can be interrupted, it can be reframed, and it can be, there would be no, the police would not be able to change anything in this world. There has to be some element of what we call switch from survive to thrive. We have to start to learn how to thrive, and that is teachable, and that is absolutely teachable.
But survival also means having to struggle a little bit as well.
That's right. It can be changed to thrive,
and it's a kind of a fact of life. Whether at your school, when we were talking about this very earlier on about bullying, you're surviving to be there and kind of get on with not being beaten up. And then also when you're in an institution, there are established ways of thinking, and then until you get a core group of people assembling. I mean, I think I went to the police Christmas do once.
Did you?
You have a society, don't you?
Oh yeah, six
society in there. I mean, the Home Office one as well. So it's interesting that there are, it's almost like university. You've got these little, little clubs that try and encourage people and support each other. But change comes within not only yourself but also within the institution as well, doesn't it? And but it must be that institution must be prepared to change too. Are the police changing? Are some of the people that you work with, are their organisations changing?
I'll probably diverge from the conversation here in as much as I think that within our community, the younger generation isn't what we were, and certainly not what our parents were. So,
I agree.
Could you catapult me into a foreign country with £5 in my pocket and I will have hundreds of properties in 30 years? No, you can't.
Would you want a role model to help you, or would you think that would that help you?
But of course, my dad didn't have a role model.
Yeah.
His role model would have been his values, the behaviours taught by his mum and dad, and our religion, and that's all he had. There was no one there to give him a hand. And too often, and maybe because I'm so sensitive to it, too often I see young Indian subcontinent, whether it's Indian, Pakistani, Bangladesh, it doesn't really matter. Junkies and thieves. We never had junkies and thieves of that magnitude for our generation, and they certainly didn't exist when my parents entered this country. So I think there is something lost. I think the nature element of surviving in a new country and working really, really hard, I see it amongst the Eastern European communities. They will do anything and everything. I'm talking to a guy who cleans my office. I always sit down and have a conversation about how his life is. And he's bought a house and there's no mortgage in Portugal for 120,000 euros. I still have a mortgage and I must earn 10 times, well, 10 times, but I'm giving my salary away here. Yeah. But I earn significantly more than him, but he is absolutely working his socks off. His work ethos is phenomenal.
And in a way, you could say that immigrants do bring up countries and do, encourage them to be stronger, and so countries rely on them, whether it be police force, whether it be in hospitals, doctors. We talk about this rivers of blood speech, but the thing is, the thing that has to be forgotten is who was inviting all these people into the country in the first place, after the war, to come back and actually reconstruct the country and recover from all the devastation that happened. That was quite hidden as well by the media about how bad it was in the UK in terms of the bombings.
Just on the same purpose, on the same point, I think it's really valuable to say that ethics are based on humanity, based on most, in fact, all faiths that I understand. And they're all under the same context of doing well for humanity. Each one has a very good context, and Sikhi does as well for us. Seva, all these are key components to humanity. Humility, saving and sharing, understanding role models. Role models from our Guru Bani, from our holy scriptures, our understanding. That within itself is our living Bani. It's our amazing Guru that teaches us our ethics.
That's a wonderful way to end the show, actually. We've actually got only just a few seconds left. I just want to say thanks so much for coming on the show and sharing your experiences. And you've been inspiring. You are role models, and we hope that people out there will watch the show and send us some feedback at info@sikhchannel.tv. You can send me a note, tell me what you think. You want to come on the show, you can come on the show. Share with us your stories of inspiration, and we look forward to seeing you next time. So thanks so much for coming on, and until next time, Wahiwala.